Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We have a fun episode of One Last Thing for you today. We're going to have our first ever, might be a first annual, but it's definitely the first ever, Ravens all-time in-season supplemental draft. And joining me to do that, as always, of course, is Slava Cooperstein, the co-host. Slava, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. I'm just having fun imagining Roger Goodell, walking up to the Baltimore Ravens and apologizing for previous slights that the league foisted upon Baltimore, telling us to build a museum instead and saying, you know what, guys, you can have a magical supplemental draft.
All right. Very good. So we'll give you a brief outline of the rules here. So we said we're going to take any player from Ravens history all time, but because the Ring of Honor players have just been done to death, we're not allowing any Ring of Honor. In fact, we're not allowing anybody to be drafted who made more than one Pro Bowl in their entire career with the Ravens, outside of the Ravens, different position, whatever it might have been. You bring these players back at the 2 or 3 year peak of their abilities. So we're not trying to say you get one player 1 year. That would obviously, you might want to pick Jamal Lewis, say in his 2,000-yard year. We're not really allowing that sort of specificity. So, you get him over the top 2 or 3 year period of his career. You do bring him in at that peak, though. And we each are working with 2 duplicate versions of the 2024 Ravens, and specifically the roster here on 12/9/24 as we make this draft. So we're each, it's a needs-based draft in a way. We're only going to have 5 total rounds each. We're trying to address offense, defense, and special teams. And Slav and I have agreed it'll be 2 offensive players, 2 defensive players, and 1 special teams player drafted in total for each team. So with that in mind, we have to get on to a coin flip here, which we're going to do by rock, paper, scissors. So imagine rock, paper, scissors on essentially 4 here for the for the start. And ready, Slava?
I am. All right.
1, 2, 3, go. Okay.
Scissors. Okay. Yep.
1, 2, 3, go.
All right.
Scissors. Okay. So I can draft first, or I can defer. We're going to have a snake draft also, by the way. So we wanted to do that. I'm going to go ahead and draft number 1. There is some risk involved in this. And the number 1 guy on my list was a fairly significant improvement for this team. I'm going to go ahead and pick Kevin Zeitler. I think that he made his first Pro Bowl last year, long career. The height of his ability is even difficult to judge because he's been so high for so long. But a fairly obvious choice, I think, to fix the guard situation. And so I picked him number 1 overall. And I'm going to, how I would use him on the Ravens, I would probably stick him in immediately at right guard and allow him to take some of the similar duties he had last year. And I think that would be a big improvement in the offensive line.
That's assuming, of course, that Harbaugh would be willing to part ways with Daniel Faalele as a starter, which up to this point hasn't proven to be the case. But no, I think that's a great selection. But actually not the first selection that I would have made along the offensive line, which in this case with my first selection, I'm going to go with Jason Brown, former guard and center, who when he left Baltimore, he took at that point, I believe, the largest center contract in the NFL. Played for a couple more years. And of course, went on to do some great things as a farmer, believe it or not. And you can read a number of articles about that. I mean, he's done some really incredible work. But my reasoning for Jason Brown, who while he made his money at center, he did play left guard successfully in the season before. He's sort of just like a hulking giant man, and somebody who would be I think really effective next to Linderbaum. Not only that, I think his versatility in being able to play center as well would be really helpful as sort of just some extra added insurance. But of course, Ken, I think you and I agree that offensive line is really the biggest room for improvement on this team.
All right, fair enough. We are snaking it, so you get the number 3 pick as well.
Okay, my number 3 pick, I'll shift over to the defense here, and I think you'll be upset with me here, Ken, but I'm going with Lardarius Webb. Yeah, I knew that would get you.
Okay.
Webby, who very possibly could have gone down as the greatest Ravens corner of all time had injuries not derailed his career a little bit. I mean, he slowed down, but still had a really fantastic career. A lot of people remember, Webb being a shutdown corner, which of course he was, but he also played a fair amount of safety towards the very end of his career, and so I would envision Webb as being a guy who you could put literally anywhere in the secondary. He could play outside corner, he could play slot, he could play free safety, and basically you could use him as another. He would be the perfect piece to the puzzle to allow Kyle Hamilton to go wherever you wanted Kyle Hamilton to go at any given time. I mean, he was that versatile.
Webb was definitely on my list. He was fourth on my big board. Actually, he's fifth on my big board originally, but fourth now. But having picked Zeitler, he would have moved up to third on my list. I'll move on. I think it's an outstanding pick, by the way. I think he jumps in right away, plays free safety whenever you need him to do it. It allows Hamilton to move up front again. And if you want him instead to play in the slot, you can do that as well and certainly not lose out at all. Lardarius Webb very, very, very high on my board. So I'll take the next two. My first pick, I have to go out to edge rusher and get a guy. And surprisingly, there are very few edge rushers that didn't make a Pro Bowl and are any good for the Baltimore Ravens. But I want the most versatile guy, and I'm taking Pernell McPhee. Yes. Outstanding, but I burn you out of him at least. That's good.
Yeah. I'm pretty pissed off about that, Ken.
Okay, well, that's good. Pernell McPhee, inside outside player, terrific run defender, terrific pass rusher. Drove the pass rush from the inside for the 2014 Ravens, most notably. And there just are not a lot of choices there at outside linebacker that make a lot of sense. So Pernell McPhee goes number 4 to the McCusick version of the 2024 Ravens. Okay, I'll type that in here, and then I'll go on with my number 5 pick. And my number 3 guy was already selected, and I could probably we'll list him in the honorable mentions at the end. I don't think there's a reason to tell you now. My number 4 pick is number 5 pick overall is kind of a surprise, perhaps. I'm going back to the 1996 Ravens and taking Derek Alexander. One of the great yards per target receivers in Ravens history. He'd be perfect in this offense. A guy you can put pretty well anywhere. You can put him X, Y, or Z. A big guy, and certainly gives you some of that value. Now, Michael Jackson played a lot of the X that year, but they were very, very versatile in their ability to get Vinny Testaverde targets. And Alexander, just a great addition to this offense with the current injury to Rashad Bateman, not knowing exactly where you are there. And even so, I'll take him as a third receiver. But I'm happy to get him.
Yeah, I think those are a couple of great selections. And in particular, I mean, Pernell McPhee, he's so versatile. He would create so many opportunities. He can play on the outside and you can kick him inside. One of my favorite sort of like unheralded Ravens. I think that was a really great selection there, Ken. So for my next 2 selections, I'm going to go with Torrey Smith. A bit of an obvious one. I mean, I just imagine Torrey Smith creating the defensive pass interference opportunities. I mean, he was absolutely the unquestioned master at that. Really would, I think he would have, he would be a great addition to this. Had a great motor, could really run away from defenders, and he would just be another deep threat that teams would really have to respect, and it would add another dimension to this offense.
Completely agree on Torrey Smith, by the way. He was my number 2 receiver in my groups. He was, and also number 6 on my big board. So you got him in exactly the position I would have taken him. Very, very exciting player. Tough call for me between Alexander and Smith. And I could have let them both drop a little bit, force you to draw the question, but I want to stay in the spirit of it and whatnot, and kind of give you how I ranked. And I thought Alexander was better and better for a longer period of time as well than Smith was.
And so I'll go ahead and round out my defensive pick here. And for me, there are a number of guys that I thought about here. some other guys that could have gone in the secondary could have been DeJuan Landry, Jim Leonard. But with the pick of Webb for me, I thought somebody a little bit closer to the front seven would be important. And for me, I decided to go with Daryl Smith. Daryl Smith was a really effective linebacker who bridged the gap between Ray Lewis and C.J. Mosley, and I think that he would provide some stability in the middle, provide some a little bit better coverage than what we've seen, and really solidify the middle of the field for us. We've got a good number of people. I'd also, I'll tell you, I don't want to step on any toes, so I'll wait to tell you some other players that I considered for all this, but I'm going to go with Daryl Smith.
We'll do that at the end. I had a long list of players who I considered for that. Not a terrible pick. A guy who I specifically said no on because I didn't think inside linebacker was a position that the Ravens needed enough help at right now. So I'll go to my number. So you're leaving the pass rush unaltered with your non-selection, with your selection of Smith as opposed to somebody else.
That's right. For me, it was Purnell or nothing.
Okay, Purnell or nothing. Okay. I will go with tough call here, but I'm going to go with DeJuan Landry at the next slot. I need to get my safety spot. You snagged my guy in Lardarius Webb. DeJuan Landry, big career with the Ravens in terms of interceptions for 5 years. He was a very special player in a lot of ways, and they got him cheap. They got him with a 5th-round draft pick. He immediately jumped in as a starter, played all 16 games in 2006, and had 5 interceptions that year with 101 return yards too. So it wasn't a cheap set, but more than that, for the 2016 with Rex Ryan at the helm, he allowed the outside safety blitz to come into the Ravens lexicon because he would just jump up and be able to take a guy like a corner would. So he's very exceptional in that end. Strong safety by trade because you had Ed Reed there. But in point of fact, I think he probably could have been a free safety. And that's where I would have him on this Ravens team, again, allowing Hamilton to move back up into the slot. I thought that added about as much value as I could on the back end.
Yeah, DeJuan Landry.
Webb, of course.
Yeah, that's right. DeJuan Landry, one of my favorite players from that era. He could do it all. Really, really physical tackler, and had a really special sort of playmaking relationship with Ed Reed. They played off of each other extremely well a number of times. Ed would pitch it to Landry or vice versa, and those were some phenomenal plays. I think that's a great pick.
All right, I'm going to go on with the number 9 pick, which I guess is the snake that finishes my draft, and that is Jacoby Jones. There were questions on how I would direct this pick and for special teams because there are other needs. Could have gone with a kicker, could have gone with a punter, but Jacoby Jones I think offered too much relative to other players. Now Jacoby's not in the Ring of Honor, correct?
Yeah, I don't believe he is. Let me check on that.
So I need to make sure that because sometimes they do it kind of immediately for people. I know they've done a lot of special Jacoby Jones stuff this year, but I don't believe he's in the Ring of Honor currently, and that was the one I was concerned about. Anyway, Jacoby Jones, my pick in the 9th selection of the draft.
That's a great pick, Ken. He was, an electrifying kick returner and punt returner, and also can give you something in the passing game if that counts. But definitely even just on the special teams side of things, really one of the best to ever do it for the Ravens. So for my special teams selection, I think because Matt Stover is in the Ravens Ring of Honor, he can't be selected. That would have been my choice because he did only make 1 Pro Bowl. But I am going to go with Sam Cook. Sam Cook brings you a lot. I think our punting game currently leaves something to be desired. And even though Sam Cook didn't necessarily have the greatest range for sort of an extended period of his career, his directional punting was probably second to none. As the point that you've made many times is that he's a Hall of Fame holder as well. So I think he could probably help our kicking operation. I was very tempted to make a controversial selection in Billy Cundiff because people don't remember this, of course, what they remember for Billy Cundiff is, of course, the miss in New England that effectively ended the game for the Ravens
and his career,
and his career, yes. But he either the year before or the year before that, he had an All-Pro kicking season for the Ravens. And so, if we're taking people at the peak of their powers and not at their worst moment, he would have been a consideration. But I think Sam Cook would do a lot for this team and hopefully help the kicking operation get back on track in the last weeks of the season.
All right. Great selections. We'll talk about some honorable mentions now, people we didn't select, but who did you have that on your top 10 list, on your big board, if you had such a thing, that was not among the 10 players we selected? Because I've got 2 players that did not get selected by either of us.
Yeah, so I thought about Art Jones.
Okay.
Thought about him for a little bit because I think that even though he didn't rack up that many sacks throughout his career, I think he did have some pressure element to his game and could collapse the pocket a little bit. So he's a guy that could have on the defensive line created opportunities for some other guys. I also considered Jim Leonard. Jim Leonard had an amazing season in 2008 for us, He just I can't justify picking him over DeJuan Landry or Webby. But I do think that he would be a great addition to this team. Very smart player, very tough player. The one player who I thought I might be able to sneak in, but I asked you, like, okay, 1 Pro Bowl, does that mean only at at their position, or does that mean ever? And you said ever. So Adalys Thomas made a Pro Bowl as a special teams player, right?
Definitely would have been on my list.
yeah. And so, if we had done the former where it was only at 1 Pro Bowl at the position, Adalys Thomas would have been in play, and I believe Derek Mason would have been in play as well, because Derek Mason, I think, made.
Spark something uncommon this holiday season with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. If you haven't finished your holiday shopping yet, don't panic. We've got a secret source for incredible original gifts, and that's Uncommon Goods. They've got unique, hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that it's exactly what I wanted feeling. Somehow, they know the exact perfect gift for every single person you know. Whether it's a football fan or a book lover, they've got unique gifts. Myself, I got some drinking glasses that have the blueprint of Camden Yards on it, as well as some nice ceramic ice cream bowls that are the shape of the Baltimore Orioles helmet, just like the plastic ones you get from the stadium, but I keep them in my cabinet, specifically for ice cream after those Oriole wins. So when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're also supporting small artists and independent businesses. Many of their things are handcrafted, made in small batches. So go ahead and shop now before they sell out this holiday season. To get your 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/ravens. That's uncommongoods.com/ravens for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, because we're all out of the ordinary.
His first Pro Bowl as a kick returner, which is where he sort of made his bones in the beginning.
I probably would not have taken Mason over Alexander or over Smith for that, maybe over Smith. I'm not sure. But I would have had Adalys Thomas would have been my number 1 guy if he'd have been available in the draft. Yeah. I'll tell you 2 players on my list that you didn't have mentioned, and I guess you took Jason Brown up high in the draft. Edwin Mulatalo was my number 3 pick overall, and second of guard. So I didn't end up taking him because I got Zeitler. And then the backup pass rusher I had, because I knew I needed to have 2 at each of these choices, was Rob Burnett. And great player, played a long time in the NFL, never had individual pass rush productivity that's at the highest level, but he definitely fits in the Ravens mold of being a great run defender who can also rush the passer some, and had about 73 career sacks, if I recall correctly. So talk about some of the other names. Maybe let's go quickly through on offense. Name me who were you really considering? Who did you kind of look at and then eliminate?
Honestly, like Mulatalo was the other big selection for me. I was really focused on guards. I mean, I kind of thought about, I mulled some of the previous tackles. Like could Jared Gaither or Orlando Brown help this team? And I think we are set. Either Orlando Brown, honestly, but are we set at tackle enough? And I thought, yes, we're really where we need help is guard.
So Orlando Brown Jr. has actually made 4 Pro Bowls already, which surprised me a little.
Oh wow,
that he'd already had 4, but Orlando Brown Sr. never made one. And he was definitely on my list of somebody. I'll give you the other offensive linemen really quick. Orlando Brown, Chris Chester went on to have a long career. He just was not good enough to crack the Ravens lineup, which was incredible, but went on to have a long career in the NFL and was very good. Jared Gaither, as you said, Ricky Wagner, Ryan Jensen, and Ben Powers were the other offensive linemen I considered. And I came up with Zeitler and Mulatalo being 1 and 2, and honestly pretty close with some of these other guys.
Yeah, Jensen's a really good pick. I didn't think about him at all, but I mean, a really, really tough guy. And again, he provides that sort of guard center versatility that would have been helpful down the stretch.
Yeah, it would be really useful on this team. At the running back position, Jamal Lewis only made 1 Pro Bowl, so he was available to us except for the Ring of Honor rule, so that knocked him out. There is not a lot to draft from the rest of Ravens history in terms of like a really good running back who did anything for a substantial period. Yeah, you could have Gus Edwards if you wanted that. It's too duplicative, I thought, of what the Ravens already have. The one guy I really considered adding to the list would have been Raheem Mostert, who was terrific last year for the Dolphins and has been, in the league now a very long time. But I couldn't bring myself to make that selection over some of the other needs on offense.
Yeah, I mean, even the obviously Ray Rice made multiple Pro Bowls, but Willis McGahee made 2. So, certainly wasn't available. I thought maybe that might be able to sneak in, but running back really is not what concerns me about this team. It's really, guard, wide receiver, and not that the wide receiver talent on the team is bad. It's just that if you lose one of your top 2 guys, I think the drop off is significant. So to have another guy would be great, but I'm sure every team in the NFL would be thrilled to be able to add one of their previous greats.
Now that was a place where there were some decent wide receivers to choose from. On my list of guys to consider and these not necessarily in the same order, Qadry Ismail, Mike Wallace, who did not play poorly when he was with the Ravens, but played better when he was with the Steelers, including his first 3 years, which are outstanding. TJ Houshmandzadeh, couldn't bring myself to draft him, even though he had some fine years with the Bengals. Michael Crabtree, again, didn't quite make the standard, although he's a productive receiver for a number of years. And then the big one, who was terrible for the Ravens, but was great in his early years, is Lee Evans. And I couldn't bring myself to pick him either. I took, Derek Alexander and Torrey Smith over him. And in terms of peak value, I think you could make the argument that either Evans or Wallace might have been better than Alexander, but I was very happy, to pick a more Raven.
Yeah, I thought about Mike Wallace as well. He, I think he displayed a lot more toughness in his time as a Raven than I thought he would have been capable of, and played pretty well for us. And again, if we're talking peak of their powers, it's probably during some of his times in Pittsburgh, and certainly would add a speed dimension, but wouldn't have picked him over Torrey Smith, that's for sure.
Got 4 tight ends that I was considering: Nick Boyle, Darren Waller, Kyle Juszczyk, and Ben Watson. Nick Boyle would have been the guy. The Ravens really need a blocking tight end right now, refill their room there. I think he could have been a good addition on this team. I just couldn't, not over a guard and not over the backup wide receiver. I think those 2 positions were more important. So even though there's some real talent there in that group, I couldn't bring myself to draft any of those.
What about Pitta?
No, wouldn't have him in with this group. He's a decent receiver, decent hands, but I wouldn't have him on the same level as really any of these 4. Wasn't as good a blocker, below as a receiver, players like Waller and the versatility Juszczyk gives you. And I think Ben Watson probably gives you a little more as a receiver as well over the course of his career. I was actually surprised he didn't make a couple Pro Bowls.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I think I was probably thinking about Watson, the Raven, as opposed to Watson throughout his career, and
Mhm.
and yeah, he was superior to Pitta. So that's a good point there, and I agree with you. Blocking, I think, is the more important attribute at this point with Kolar going down.
Right. And Joe Flacco was on my list. He's the only quarterback I considered. Never made a Pro Bowl. Still seems incredible to me that that's the way that went down.
He was, however, Pepsi Rookie of the Year.
All right. Which along with the $1.25 will get you a soda out of many Pepsi machines. So on defense, we took Pernell McPhee and Burnett at the top of our edge rusher, but that's a really short group. The only other two names I really came up with that were maybe worth drafting, one was Paul Kruger, and then Jarrett Johnson, who would give you some of inside linebacker, outside linebacker versatility, maybe that I think the team already has in a certain sense with Malik Harrison. And even if it might be a slight upgrade, I wouldn't really be that excited about it.
Yeah, I had sort of the same thought process as you, particularly, they're just the margin between like guys who never made the Pro Bowl, and then all of a sudden, all of the guys, you've got your Suggs, you've got your Doomerville, you've got your Boulware, those guys racked up Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl, and so they weren't available to us. But yeah, Pernell McPhee was the real heartbreaker for me. That would have been a great pick, but it's turnaround is fair play, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. You snaked away Webb from me, so I'm not feeling bad for you. Chris Canty, another guy's an inside-outside guy, but the list of interior defensive linemen, Tony Siragusa never made a Pro Bowl, actually, but he's in the Ravens Ring of Honor, so he can't. I think he is anyway. He's in the Ravens Ring of Honor? Pretty sure he is.
That is a good question. I would not
Tony
be surprised.
Siragusa is not in the Ravens Ring of Honor.
Look at that.
All right, so he would have been a legitimate player to draft. And then Brandon Williams was there, Chris Canty, Kelly Gregg, and Zach Sealer. So lots of choices on the interior. I just think if the Ravens would truly have Pierce and Jones back, they have about the best two players they've ever had. Sam Adams was not available because he made 3 Pro Bowls, and Elodie Nada similarly, but a good group of available draftees there, I guess, on the interior line.
Did you give any thought to Jermaine Lewis for kick returner?
I thought he had made 2 Pro Bowls, and that was my problem with it.
Oh, you know what? Maybe you're right about that.
So let me look at that really quickly. But that was my issue. Otherwise, I probably would have taken him over Jacoby Jones.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Probably safer, less likely to muff a punt.
98 and 01, he made the Pro Bowl, and he had his yards per return career. Something like it was 15 at one point, but his yards per return career with the Ravens was 11.8 on punts. So definitely a big time playmaker. And yeah, I think I would have, because you'd have gotten some extra receiving value out of that too. Of course, you get that with Jacoby as well. So if you're allowed to cheat and use him as a receiver, then you got it made. And that would have been the great thing about the Adelis pick is you're drafting Adelis on special teams, but then you're going to stick him in and play a bunch of defensive snaps as well.
Did you give any thoughts to Michael Jackson? That's another one that I thought about.
I did, but he didn't have quite the career that Alexander or really any of the other wide receivers did, although his peak in 1996 was higher. So right. I didn't do him for that reason, but he's definitely a great receiver. I mean, you could do a lot worse.
And we have.
I've got 2 inside linebackers on my list considered, Jamie Sharper and Bart Scott. Now, there were other guys who were, Donnell Ellerby and others like that who might have helped out. And it's a position of some weakness at the will right now. I probably would take Sharper over Scott. Where would you be on those 2?
I feel like it might just be the bias of the time that when I watched more closely as a fan, but I think I would probably lean Bart Scott. I mean, he was just very, very versatile. Probably would add some intensity to the middle of the field too. That I would like, and as I recall, was pretty good in coverage as well. So. I think I strongly consider him for my other pick, and think that he would definitely be a shot in the arm for this team.
Okay. And then at corner, I had 6 guys in total I thought about, and they were Lardarius Webb, who you got, Dwayne Starks, who I thought would have been a great pick, by the way, 20 interceptions with the Ravens in his 4 years here. Jimmy Smith, who part of my thinking would have been move him to safety and see what he could do there, but you could do worse than with him at right corner also. Corey Graham, Samari Roll, and Josh Wilson, all considered. I mean, those guys, obviously there's a grading on that scale.
Yeah, those are all names I went through as well. I mean, for me, had it not been Webb, I probably would have gone with one of the other safeties or Starks.
Okay. All right. Understandable. I had 5 safeties considered. You mentioned Jim Leonard. He was also on my list. Dewan Landry, Chuck Clark, Geno Stone, and Deshaun Elliott. Now, 3 of those guys are still playing in the league, obviously. Geno Stone is still playing, but if you get Geno Stone back at the 3-year peak of his abilities or whatever, then you kind of get last year's Geno Stone mixed in there somehow, and you get a better free safety candidate. And then Chuck Clark was very good, very versatile, could play dime back for this team if that's the way you wanted to roll with him. That wouldn't be a problem at all. Deshaun Elliott, same thing. He's having a great year on the back end for the Steelers, and I'm disgusted by it.
Yeah, I think that you made the right call with Dewan Landry. I mean, I think pretty much on any other team in the league at the time that he played, he would have been the starting free safety. I mean, it's just so happens he was right next to Ed Reed, but he could do it all. I mean, he was just such a physical player, had such good playmaking ability, hands. Just I think a rare combination of talent. That you could. Sort of call him a lesser version of Ed Reed when Ed Reed was at the strong safety position, and that's a really high praise. I think he was a phenomenal player, and he would do a lot for this team.
And you mentioned Billy Cundiff was your kicker. If it hadn't been for if I hadn't have picked a different special teams player, I might have gone with Stephen Hauschka as a kicker. Long career, been very successful, a lot of 50-yard plus field goals. Will Lutz, not a bad choice either. I don't think he ever kicked for the Ravens, but he certainly has been with the Ravens in camp as far as that goes. But Hauschka would be my choice anyway among those 2.
Something that would have been but I just have to mention this, a fun pick if we had not done the Pro Bowl requirement, but maybe just like left out Ravens Ring of Honor guys, would have been James Harrison.
Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be a good pick. Yes.
Yeah.
You'd have gotten that one 5-hole on me for sure too, because I would not have remembered that he'd been cut by the Ravens 3 times in this process by the way I did it. There's no way. So I had a bunch of guys that I considered in coverage, and some of them I'm really considering in terms of what other value can they add on one side of the ball. But I'll go through those really quickly. LJ Fort, who I thought could be not only a great special teams coverage guy, but also give you a little bit of third down will linebacker or whatever, really wherever you want to use him as a will value. Albert McClellan, a lot of versatility, a lot of kick coverage. Anthony Levine, a dime, who gives you a lot of kick coverage. Chris Moore, extra wide receiver, who gives you a lot of kick coverage. Very duplicative of Tylan Wallace, but still a decent player. Delshon Phillips, who was here a year ago, maybe gives you a little bit of Mike backup as well as covers kicks. Billy Davis, Anthony Mitchell, more probably too much weight in terms of the individual play he made. Gary Stills, only here for a year. Kelly Washington, only here for a year. Both players who could help you on one side of the ball.
Kelly Washington, third down monster, just unbelievable rate of converting third down passes. I did think about McClellan as well, because I mean he was just the ultimate Swiss Army knife. He at different points in his career, in his Ravens career, played along every single linebacker position, and I think displayed competence at all of them. And when Ray Lewis went down our Super Bowl season with the tricep injury, there was little to no fall off when McClellan took over. And of course we know that Ray was on his last legs athletically at that point, but obviously was key in getting players set and in position. So for McClellan to come in and be able to basically execute at a level that didn't have much drop off, I think is a real credit to his ability.
Outstanding key player and long time Raven, one of the survivors of the team who made it through a lot of contracts with the Ravens at just a small premium to the vet minimum. And you need a lot of guys like that to help you play good, consistent special teams over a lot of years. Anyway, this is a lot of fun, Slav. I really appreciate doing this. I've already got some new ideas for an off-season version of this, where we'll expand it to 7 rounds and have some new rounds, new rules applied. But tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right. Outstanding. Other folks out there, if you would, please tell somebody else about the show, like and subscribe if you're listening to it on YouTube. And by all means, if you can, write a 5-star 50-word review. We're always happy to get those. Thanks again for listening. For Slava Cooperstein, this is Ken McCusick. We'll talk to you next week on Film Study.